Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the last conversation he had with his father. The memory haunted him every night. Just 6 days before Richard's supposed death, they had shared lunch at a small restaurant outside the city. Unlike Michael and Vanessa, Ethan rarely asked for anything. The lunch had been simple. No business discussions. No financial planning. Just a father and son talking. But near the end of the meal, Richard had said something strange. Something Ethan hadn't fully understood at the time. If one day I'm gone unexpectedly, don't trust what people show you. Ethan remembered laughing. What does that mean? Richard had smiled. It means character is revealed when people think the consequences are gone. At the time, Ethan thought it was another one of his father's philosophical lessons. Now it felt different. Almost like a warning. A message. A clue. The more Ethan thought about it, the less sense the official story made. His father was obsessive about safety. He never sailed alone. Never. Yet according to reports, he had suddenly taken a boat out by himself during dangerous weather. It didn't fit. Nothing fit. Meanwhile, Richard continued watching from the shadows. Every day brought new revelations. Most of them painful. Michael had become increasingly aggressive. He pressured board members, manipulated executives, made promises he couldn't keep. He even began removing longtime employees loyal to Richard. People who had spent decades helping build the company. One evening, Richard watched a meeting unfold inside corporate headquarters. A senior executive named Daniel sat across from Michael. Daniel had worked with Richard for 27 years. He was practically family. Michael looked at him coldly. We're restructuring. Daniel frowned. Your father trusted me. Michael shrugged. My father made many outdated decisions. Richard's jaw tightened. Daniel looked genuinely hurt. You don't mean that. Michael leaned back. Actually, I do. By the end of the meeting, Daniel was gone. Just like that. Years of loyalty erased. Richard stood and walked away from the monitors. He couldn't watch anymore. For the first time in his career, he felt powerless. Not because of competitors, not because of market crashes, but because his own son was dismantling everything he had spent a lifetime building. 3 days later, Samuel entered Richard's temporary residence carrying a folder. His expression was grim. What now? Richard asked. Samuel placed the folder on the table. You need to see this. Inside were financial documents, private records, secret transfers. Richard's face slowly turned pale. Michael and Vanessa had quietly hired advisors to challenge portions of Richard's estate. Not because they needed money, not because they believed the documents were unfair, but because they wanted more. Millions more. Richard stayed at the numbers. The greed seemed endless. No amount was enough. No inheritance was sufficient. No gift was appreciated. Everything became a negotiation. A transaction. A calculation. Samuel sat across from him. You still have time to stop this. Richard shook his head. No. What if it destroys the family? Richard looked away. The family was already broken. The words hung heavily between them. Neither man spoke. Across town, Ethan was uncovering something extraordinary. His investigation had started with small inconsistencies, conflicting timelines, missing details, unanswered questions. Then he discovered something strange. One rescue worker involved in the recovery operation had abruptly resigned 2 days after Richard's death. When Ethan tracked him down, the man initially refused to speak. But eventually, guilt overcame fear. There was no body. Ethan froze. What? The man swallowed hard. There was wreckage. He looked around nervously, but no body. Ethan felt his pulse racing. Then why was he declared dead? The man lowered his voice. Orders came from very high up. Suddenly, everything changed. Every suspicion, every unanswered question, every strange feeling. Ethan left immediately, his mind racing. Could it be possible? Could Richard Hale still be alive? The idea sounded insane. Impossible. Yet the evidence was growing. And if it was true, why? The answer arrived 2 days later. Through pure chance. Or perhaps fate. While reviewing old company records, Ethan noticed payments made to a private security firm. The payments continued after Richard's supposed death. Large payments. Millions of dollars. The account authorization matched Samuel Pierce, Richard's attorney, the same man handling the estate. Ethan stayed at the documents, then slowly smiled, for the first time in weeks, because he finally understood. Someone was hiding something, and he knew exactly where to look. That night, Ethan drove to Samuel's countryside property. The house sat isolated among acres of land. Lights glowed faintly inside. Ethan parked 100 yards away. His heart pounded. Every instinct told him he was about to uncover something life-changing. He approached quietly, then stopped. A figure stood near the window. An older man, partially hidden, bearded, different hairstyle, different appearance. But something felt familiar. The posture, the movements, the way he tilted his head. Ethan's eyes widened. His breath caught. No way. The figure turned slightly, and Ethan knew. It was him. Richard Hale. Alive. The shock nearly knocked him off his feet. For several seconds he simply stared, unable to process what he was seeing. Then the front door opened. Richard stepped outside. Neither man spoke. The night air felt frozen. Finally Ethan whispered, "Dad." Richard closed his eyes. The disguise no longer mattered. The secret was over. Slowly, he nodded. Ethan's voice cracked. "You alive?" Richard nodded again. And suddenly Ethan exploded. Not with relief. Not with joy. With anger. Raw, overwhelming anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Richard stood silently. "We buried you." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "We cried for you." His voice broke. "I thought I lost you." Richard felt his own emotions rising. "Ethan." "No." Ethan stepped forward. "No." Months of grief poured out. Weeks of pain. Fear. Confusion. Heartbreak. All of it. "You let us believe you were dead." Richard lowered his head. "I needed answers." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Answers? You could have asked." "I did ask." Richard's voice finally rose. 4 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard looked directly into his son's eyes. "I asked through every family dinner. I asked through every conversation. I asked every time I tried to spend time together." His voice trembled, and all anyone wanted to discuss was money. Ethan stared at him, unable to respond. Richard's eyes filled with tears. The only way to know the truth was to disappear. For a long moment neither moved. Then Ethan quietly asked the question, "And what did you find?" Richard looked away. The answer devastated him. "I found out which of my children loved me." The following morning, everything changed. Richard decided the test was over. No more surveillance. No more secrets. No more hiding. He summoned Michael and Vanessa to company headquarters. Both arrived expecting discussions about inheritance disputes. Instead, they walked into the executive boardroom and froze. Richard Hale sat at the head of the table, alive, watching them. For several seconds nobody moved. Michael's face turned white. Vanessa looked like she had seen a ghost. Because, in a way, she had. "Dad," Vanessa whispered. Richard said nothing. Michael staggered backward. "This isn't possible." "Oh, it's possible." The room fell silent. Richard stood, slowly, calmly, but there was sadness in his eyes. A sadness deeper than anger. "You spent 30 days showing me exactly who you are." Neither child spoke. They couldn't. Because they knew. Somehow they knew. Richard knew everything. The meetings. The celebrations. The manipulation. The greed. All of it. Then Richard did something neither expected. He played the recordings. One by one. Michael watched himself discussing power. Selling control of the company. Mocking his father's legacy. Vanessa watched herself celebrating the inheritance. Complaining about trust funds. Screaming about money. Their faces crumbled. The truth was undeniable. The room felt suffocating. Finally Michael spoke. "You spied on us." Richard stared at him. "That's your defense." Silence. Vanessa began crying. But for the first time, Richard wasn't sure whether the tears were genuine or simply fake. Then came the final decision. The decision everyone had been waiting for. Richard placed 3 envelopes on the table. One for each child. "This is my final estate plan." Nobody moved. Richard continued. "Michael." He slid the first envelope forward. "You will receive enough money to live comfortably." Michael looked relieved. Until Richard continued. "But you will never control this company." The relief vanished instantly. "Vanessa." The second envelope moved forward. "You will receive the same." Vanessa opened her mouth to protest. Richard raised his hand, and she fell silent. Then he picked up the final envelope. The largest one. The envelope meant for Ethan. Richard looked at his youngest son. The son who had expected nothing, demanded nothing, and sacrificed everything. "Ethan." His voice cracked. You inherit the controlling shares. The room exploded. Michael stood instantly. What? Vanessa looked horrified. This is insane. Richard ignored them. His eyes never left Ethan. You gave when nobody was watching. You helped when there was no reward. You remained human. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. He never wanted the company, never wanted the money. But in that moment, he understood. This wasn't about wealth. It was about trust, about responsibility, about character. Richard smiled sadly. The empire isn't going to the smartest child. He looked around the room. It isn't going to the most ambitious child. His gaze settled on Ethan. It's going to the one who remembered what truly matters. Months later, the company flourished. Employees returned. Trust was restored. Ethan led differently. With humility. With empathy. With purpose. Michael eventually left to pursue his own ventures. Vanessa retreated from the spotlight and slowly rebuilt relationships damaged by years of selfishness. And Richard, for the first time in decades, he retired. Not because he was tired, but because he finally had peace. His experiment had cost him dearly. It exposed painful truths. It shattered illusions. It nearly destroyed his family. Yet it revealed something priceless. Character cannot be inherited. Money cannot create integrity. And when people believe nobody is watching, they reveal exactly who they are. Sometimes that truth is heartbreaking. Sometimes it is beautiful. And sometimes it changes everything. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories. Like, comment your thoughts about the story and also the story you want to hear next. Share with loved ones and friends, so they too can enjoy the story as well. Thank you.